Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a quiet room in the early 1800s. Candlelight flickers against tall windows, casting soft shadows across shelves lined with books and delicate mechanical instruments. Outside, the world is still, horse-drawn carriages resting for the night, the distant hum of London settling into silence. Inside that room sits a girl with a mind that moves faster than the era she was born into. A girl who sees numbers not as cold figures, but as shapes, music, and endless possibilities. Her name is Ada Lovelace, and her life, though brief and lived long before electricity lit the world, would plant the first seeds of modern computing. Long before machines existed, she imagined them. Long before anyone dreamed of software, she wrote its earliest blueprint. And long before our digital age began, she saw its shadow on the horizon. Tonight, we're going to follow her journey, gently, slowly, step by step, from the quiet salons of London to the brilliant mathematical circles where she became the world's first computer programmer, not through the loud noise of innovation, but through the soft, steady curiosity that lived inside her since childhood. So settle in. Let your thoughts drift like candle smoke, and allow this calm story to guide you into rest. This is the life of Ada Lovelace, the woman who dreamed of machines long before they could dream of us. Chapter 1. The Child of Numbers. Ada Lovelace entered the world on a cold winter morning in December 1815, at a time when London was still wrapped in fog, candlelight, and the delicate etiquette of Regency society. She was born into two forces that could not have been more different. Her mother, Annabella Milbank, was a woman of logic, sharp-minded, disciplined, and deeply committed to the world of mathematics. Her father, Lord Byron, was a poet, brilliant, unpredictable, and consumed by passions that made him both adored and feared. Ada never knew him. Within a month of her birth, Byron left England forever, leaving behind not only a legacy of poetry, but a daughter whose mind would one day transcend even his fame. Annabella, wounded by the chaos of her marriage, feared that Ada might inherit her father's emotional volatility. She devoted herself entirely to shaping her daughter with logic, reason, and structure, believing mathematics would anchor the girl's mind against the stormy temperament of her father. And so, from the moment Ada could hold a pencil, her education followed a steady, carefully crafted path. Tutors arrived daily with lessons in calculation, geometry, and disciplined thinking. Yet even as they taught her arithmetic, Ada often asked questions that drifted beyond the edges of logic, questions with imagination hiding behind them. Her childhood home was a place where silence and order ruled. Tall windows framed the shifting London sky. Bookshelves held volumes of philosophy, science, and mathematics. Her mother moved through the halls with quiet purpose, always intent on ensuring that Ada's mind grew in structured directions. But beneath the surface, Ada carried something no structure could contain, a vibrant curiosity that approached mathematics not as a system of rules, but as a living world filled with shapes, patterns, and possibilities that dance just beyond the reach of ordinary thought. From a young age, Ada saw the world differently. Numbers were never just numbers to her. They were colors, melodies, and invisible architectures she could almost touch. She would sit beside the window for hours, sketching imaginary machines that rose from gears and shapes in her mind. Her drawings filled pages, flying contraptions, mechanical birds, and elaborate engines that could shift motion into something entirely new. She had no machines to study, no models to copy, only her imagination and an instinctive understanding that mathematics was not merely a discipline, but a language for describing the invisible. Her mother observed this with a mixture of admiration and worry. She wanted Ada to be brilliant, but she also feared creativity, a trait she associated with Byron's instability. And so Ada's education intensified. She was taught discipline, structure, and logic by some of the finest tutors of her time. She learned mathematics years before most children learned letters. Her lessons were strict, her routine carefully controlled, and her exposure to imagination quietly monitored. But imagination has a way of finding its own freedom, and Ada's mind, restless and luminous, could not be confined. When she was still very young, Ada fell ill with severe measles, a sickness that confined her to bed for months. The world outside her window existed only in fragments, blurred silhouettes, muffled carriage wheels rolling across the street, and the soft murmur of her mother's voice outside the door. But isolation did not quiet her mind, it amplified it. Lying still for so long, unable to play or run, she began exploring landscapes inside her imagination. She invented mechanical birds that beat their wings with perfect geometric rhythm, sketched diagrams of engines that could move through the air, and filled notebooks with calculations she believed might one day make flight possible. Her physicians marveled at her persistence. Even weakened, she asked for paper and pencils, asked for books, asked for anything she could use to continue thinking. She had not yet turned 10, and already her mind was reaching toward the boundaries of what seemed possible. As she recovered, Ada's curiosity grew even sharper. She asked her tutors questions that startled them, not because they were improper, but because they pointed toward ideas decades ahead of their time. She wanted to know how machines thought, whether numbers could describe not only quantities, but relationships, whether a machine that solved equations could be taught to solve other things, like patterns or music. These questions seemed fanciful, almost absurd in the 1820s. Yet to Ada, they were simply the next logical steps in a world still waiting to be understood. Her mother, determined to shape Ada in the image of logic and reason, began introducing her to prominent thinkers. Among them was Mary Somerville, a brilliant Scottish scientist and mathematician whose calm intelligence made her a rare role model for women in science at the time. Somerville became both teacher and inspiration, encouraging Ada's questions instead of dismissing them. She treated the girl's imagination not as a danger, but as a gift, something that mathematics could refine rather than suppress. Under Somerville's guidance, Ada's world expanded. She learned about astronomy, algebra, magnetism, and the newest scientific developments of the era. She read about mechanical devices, steam engines, and the early hints of the Industrial Revolution. She also began to understand something profound, that the world was not divided into logic and imagination the way her mother believed. Instead, they were threads of the same tapestry, woven together to describe everything from movement to music to the laws of nature. As she grew older, Ada became increasingly fascinated with the idea of mechanical systems. She studied gear ratios, the mathematics of movement, and the principles behind automation. But unlike most mathematicians of her era, Ada did not simply calculate. She imagined. She asked what machines might become. She wondered what tasks a machine could perform if it were not limited by physical labor. She asked whether machines could manipulate not just numbers, but ideas. Her youth was also shaped by the complexities of Victorian society. Because she was a woman, doors closed to her as quickly as they opened. She could not attend universities, could not join scientific societies, and was often treated as an anomaly, a brilliant girl whose intellect defied expectations. Yet Ada never responded with bitterness. Instead, she embraced an inner discipline that became as much a part of her nature as her imagination. She studied privately, read voraciously, and sought out thinkers willing to take her seriously. By her late teens, Ada's reputation had quietly begun to grow. Scholars who met her left with a sense that she saw the world differently, not in fragments, but as a vast network of relationships waiting to be decoded. Her intelligence was sharp, but it was her vision that stood out most. A perspective that treated mathematics not merely as a tool of precision, but as a gateway to understanding systems, logic, and the very structure of thought itself. It was during this period that Ada's path crossed with the man who would profoundly shape her destiny, Charles Babbage. Babbage was a mathematician, inventor, and thinker whose mind moved quickly, unpredictably, and often far ahead of his time. He was designing a new kind of machine, a mechanical device capable of performing calculations automatically without human intervention. He called it the difference engine. Most people saw it as a marvel, some saw it as a curiosity, but Ada saw it for what it truly was, a glimpse into the future. When she first visited Babbage's home and saw a small prototype of the machine, her reaction was immediate and electrifying. While others admired the engineering, Ada understood the concept. She could see the underlying structure, gears as symbols, motion as logic, mechanisms as the physical embodiment of thought. In that moment, Ada recognized something few others could, that such a machine was not merely a calculator, but the beginning of something far greater, a machine that could, one day, manipulate symbols the way the human mind did. Babbage, impressed by her insight, invited her deeper into his circle. He shared his ideas openly with her, recognizing that she understood them with a clarity unmatched by most. Their friendship became one of intellectual harmony, his mechanical genius balanced by her visionary mathematical insight. Ada's education had prepared her to analyze Babbage's engine, but her imagination allowed her to transcend it. Around this time, Ada married William King, who would later become the Earl of Lovelace, giving her the title by which she is now remembered. Yet even as she stepped into the expectations of Victorian aristocracy, hosting dinners, managing household affairs, and raising children, Ada never abandoned her intellectual pursuits. Her mind remained restless, always reaching for something more. She studied algebra with advanced mathematicians, dissected new scientific papers, and continued working closely with Babbage. She lived in two worlds at once, the rigid expectations of society and the limitless universe inside her mind. But Ada's life was never simple. She struggled with periods of illness and emotional difficulty, echoes perhaps as of the volatility her mother feared she inherited from Byron. She felt the constraints of her era painfully, knowing that her ideas stretched far beyond the roles society allowed her. Yet, even during the darkest moments, one truth anchored her: the profound belief that mathematics held a key to understanding the deepest patterns of existence. Her notebooks from this period reveal a mind that moved in multiple dimensions at once. She wrote about numbers, but also about philosophy. She explored mechanical design, but also the metaphysical implications of computation. She described mathematics as a language for the unseen, a phrase that captures the essence of her genius. And though she did not yet know it, the greatest work of her life, the work that would redefine her legacy long after her time, was soon approaching. A machine was being conceived, ideas were shifting into place, and Ada Lovelace, with her imagination sharpened by logic and her logic elevated by imagination, was standing at the edge of something the world had not yet dreamed of, a future where machines could think, where numbers became music, where ideas could be encoded, processed, and transformed into something entirely new. Ada Lovelace was ready, and the world, though it did not yet know it, was about to follow her into the dawn of computing. When Ada Lovelace entered her 20s, the world around her began shifting in quiet but unmistakable ways. The Industrial Revolution was reshaping cities with steam engines, factories, and the early pulse of mechanized labor. London, with its fog-softened streets and crowded salons, felt caught between tradition and the rising hum of machinery. It was a time when metal and mathematics seemed to weave into the fabric of everyday life, and people were torn between fascination and fear. Amidst this changing world, Ada's life moved gently but steadily toward a destiny no one else could yet see. Her friendship with Charles Babbage deepened during these years, growing from fascination into a genuine intellectual partnership. Babbage was brilliant but restless, a man whose thoughts darted between ideas faster than even he could follow. He spoke of mechanisms and mathematics with a ferocious intensity that often overwhelmed the people around him. But Ada was different. She did not flinch at his speed. Instead, she kept pace, understanding the bridges between his ideas and the patterns beneath them. Their conversations flowed like two currents joining into a single river, one metallic and mechanical, the other imaginative and mathematical. Babbage's difference engine had already captured Ada's interest, but it was his next invention that would awaken the extraordinary depths of her genius: the analytical engine. Unlike the difference engine, which was designed for a specific kind of calculation, the analytical engine was something entirely new. Babbage envisioned a machine that could manipulate symbols, follow programmable instructions, and produce complex outputs. It would have gears, levers, memory stores, and a central processing unit. In essence, he imagined the world's first general-purpose computer, a century before any such machine would be built. At first, many dismissed his ideas as impossible. The analytical engine was too ambitious, too complex, too unlike anything the world had seen. But Ada saw what others could not. She did not merely understand the machine, she understood the idea of it. It was not a calculator. It was a symbolic thinker, a mechanical mind, a device capable of carrying out operations that mirrored human reasoning. In her private writings, Ada described the machine as a thinking engine, though she knew that phrase would have been considered outrageous in her time. She understood that the analytical engine was not limited to arithmetic. If numbers could be translated into letters, music, or logic, then the machine could operate on them all. The machine, she realized, could be used to model relationships, patterns, and behavior. It could compose music, analyze language, or reveal structures within nature that even human minds struggled to perceive. This was a revolutionary leap, a leap only Ada could make. One quiet afternoon, as she sat at her desk while soft sunlight filtered through lace curtains, Ada began sketching her interpretation of Babbage's engine. She drew gears like constellations, sequences like flowing patterns, and notations that reflected the harmony she perceived between mathematics and imagination. She saw the engine not as a machine of metal, but as a musical instrument of thought, an object capable of performing any operation expressed through symbols. These thoughts filled her notebooks, spilling across pages in long, elegant lines of prose and intricate diagrams. Her marriage to William King provided her with social standing, but also, surprisingly, with the freedom to pursue her intellectual work more deeply. Her husband supported her academic passions, recognizing her talents even if he did not fully understand their breadth. Their household ran according to the conventions of Victorian aristocracy: dinners, social visits, charitable events, yet Ada often withdrew from these gatherings as soon as politeness allowed. She preferred her quiet study, where mathematics lay open before her like a vast landscape waiting to be explored. During this period, Ada encountered Luigi Menabrea's work, a paper written in French that attempted to explain the analytical engine. It was a technical document, thoughtful but incomplete, lacking the clarity and vision needed to convey the true power of Babbage's invention. Ada agreed to translate the paper into English, believing that she could offer more than a simple transcription. And as she began her translation, her imagination sparked. She realized that Menabrea's words hinted at potential, but they did not capture the full scope of the machine. So she wrote notes, long, detailed, brilliant notes that expanded upon the original article. She worked late into the night, long after candles had burned low, writing in small, precise handwriting that flowed steadily across pages. She took Babbage's concepts and lifted them into a world of possibilities. She explained the machine's architecture, its mechanisms, and its mathematical logic. But she went further, far further than anyone at the time could have imagined. In one of her notes, Ada included what is now considered the first computer program, a detailed step-by-step sequence of operations the analytical engine could perform to compute Bernoulli numbers. It was not merely a calculation, it was a method, a blueprint for instructing a machine to perform a task independently. Ada's program treated the analytical engine not as a calculator, but as an automated thinker, capable of following symbolic instructions. Her insights extended beyond programming. She predicted the future of computing with uncanny accuracy. She wrote that the machine could someday compose complex music, create art, analyze patterns, and manipulate any form of symbol, not just numbers. She understood that the analytical engine was not a mathematical tool, but a universal machine, something capable of reshaping the world. Her Note G, the longest and most visionary, remains one of the most important documents in the early history of computer science. In it, Ada wrote, "The analytical engine weaves algebraic patterns just as the jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves." This metaphor captured the essence of modern computing. Programs were patterns. Machines, like looms, manipulated symbols, and the possibilities were limited only by human imagination. Babbage himself was astonished. He praised Ada's clarity, calling her the enchantress of numbers for her ability to understand not just what the machine did, but what it represented. Their collaboration became legendary, though their work often faced skepticism from institutions reluctant to support such radical ideas. Despite her growing brilliance, Ada's life outside mathematics was complex. She battled chronic illness, often confined to her bedroom for days at a time. Doctors prescribed opiates, bleeding, and restrictive treatments that only worsened her condition. She also wrestled with emotional turmoil, perhaps inherited from the father she never knew. Her letters reveal conflict between her intellectual ambitions and the pressures of Victorian womanhood. Society expected her to remain in the domestic sphere, yet her mind reached beyond it constantly, relentlessly. Ada struggled to balance these demands. She wanted to be a devoted wife and mother, yet her thoughts returned always to mathematics, to machinery, to symbolic logic. Her health declined steadily under the strain, but she refused to stop working. Even bedridden, she asked for books and papers, her mind sharp even as her body weakened. The analytical engine, despite its brilliance, faced one challenge Ada could not solve. It remained unbuilt. Babbage was unable to secure funding. Politicians saw it as extravagant. Engineers doubted it. And the world, still adjusting to steam engines and railways, was not ready for a machine that could think. But Ada understood something deeper. The machine did not need to exist physically to change the future. The idea alone was enough. Her writings, her programs, her visions, these were seeds planted in a soil that would not bear fruit for another century, but they were planted nonetheless. In her final years, Ada's health deteriorated rapidly. She sought solace in her writings, in the quiet spaces between pain and clarity. She revisited her notes, revising thoughts, refining ideas, and dreaming of a future where machines and mathematics intertwined to create something greater than either alone. She died at the age of 36, the same age her father had been when he passed. Her death was quiet, shaded by the strict rules of Victorian medicine and the incomplete understanding of her brilliance. But the work she left behind remained luminous, waiting for the world to catch up. And the world eventually did. A century later, engineers and scientists would rediscover her writings and recognize what she had accomplished. They would realize that the first person to understand the true nature of computing, its power, its potential, its future, had been a young woman who lived long before computers existed. But in the quiet rooms of her home, beneath candlelight and paper, Ada Lovelace had already seen the future clearly. She had seen machines not just as tools, but as partners in thought. She had seen a world where imagination shaped technology, and she had given humanity its first glimpse of what that world could become. Ada's mind had traveled where no machine yet could, and the world was slowly, inevitably, preparing to follow. As Ada moved deeper into her 30s, her life settled into a strange rhythm, part domestic responsibility, part intellectual pursuit, and part quiet struggle against the physical and emotional limitations that had followed her since childhood. She lived in elegant Victorian homes filled with servants, chandeliers, and carefully tended gardens, yet her mind rarely dwelled on the conventions around her. It drifted instead toward ideas, toward symbols, patterns, mechanical possibilities. The world saw a countess, a mother, a wife. Yet inside her, the imagination of a scientist moved constantly, tirelessly, like gears in motion. Victorian society expected women of Ada's rank to be graceful, composed, and obedient to the rhythms of aristocratic life. There were visits to the opera, charity events, gatherings hosted in candlelit drawing rooms, and endless obligations tied to reputation and duty. Ada fulfilled many of these roles with quiet discipline, but her mind was often elsewhere. She would leave conversations politely, slip upstairs into her study, and immerse herself again in mathematics. The pages on her desk were filled with notations, equations, and flowing paragraphs that revealed a mind untethered from the limitations of the day. Her marriage to William King, later the Earl of Lovelace, had brought her security, but it also built a cage around her potential. Though he admired her intelligence, he struggled to understand the depth of her ambition. And society did little to support a woman whose dreams extended beyond the boundaries of drawing rooms and polite conversation. Ada often felt isolated, a brilliant mind surrounded by rooms filled with people who could not see the world as she did. That loneliness stayed with her, softening her voice, but sharpening her determination. Still, Ada found escape in her correspondence. Letters became the lifeline of her intellectual world. She exchanged ideas with leading thinkers, philosophers, and mathematicians. These letters were not light or casual. They were filled with serious discussions about algebra, logic, scientific principles, and the evolving designs of Babbage's machines. Some scholars were surprised, even overwhelmed, by her insight. Others were dismissive, unable to accept that a woman could grasp concepts far beyond the training of most men. But Ada persisted, writing with clarity, humility, and a confidence grounded in her vision. As her relationship with Babbage deepened, she often found herself defending him. The public mocked his analytical engine as a fantasy, a mechanical impossibility. Politicians dismissed the project as too expensive, too complicated, too far ahead of its time. But Ada saw the underlying truth that others could not, that the machine was not simply a construction of metal, but a conceptual revolution, a new way to think, a new way to process information, and a new way to imagine the relationship between human minds and mechanical tools. Her notes, especially the remarkable Note G, had been published to quiet academic interest, but they did not create the stir she hoped for. Victorian England simply wasn't ready. Steam engines were still a marvel, railway trains were barely understood, telegraph lines were only beginning to stretch between cities. The thought of a programmable machine capable of operating on symbolic logic felt impossibly distant, a century too early. But Ada did not write for her own era. She wrote for the world that would follow. During these years, Ada began to explore an idea she called poetical science. She believed that imagination was not separate from logic, that the two were deeply connected, and that discovery happened when creativity illuminated structure. In her notebooks, she described mathematics as a poetic science of the invisible. She believed that symbols had a music to them, that equations carried a rhythm, and that the analytical engine was not merely a machine, but the embodiment of that rhythm. Her ideas blended art and logic in a way no one else dared explore. This belief in poetical science guided every part of her thinking. She saw patterns in nature, in music, in mechanical design. She envisioned machines that could compose symphonies, generate patterns of logic, or even mimic the creative processes of the human mind. Her predictions were astonishing, so forward-thinking that they would not become reality until the late 20th century. Ada was imagining software 100 years before software existed. She was envisioning artificial intelligence before anyone understood the concept of machine learning. But her visionary mind existed within a fragile body. Her health fluctuated constantly. Some days she woke with sharp energy, ready to tackle complex equations or revise her notes. Other days she lay in bed, weakened by pain, fevers, and exhaustion. Doctors treated her with methods common in the Victorian era: opium for pain, bloodletting for fevers, rest and isolation for emotional turmoil. These treatments often did more harm than good. Yet Ada endured them quietly, storing her strength for the hours when she could return to her work. As her physical condition worsened, she threw herself even more intensely into intellectual exploration. She believed that she had a limited time to articulate her ideas, that she had to write down what she saw so that future generations could find it. She studied topics far beyond her era: the philosophy of artificial systems, the logic of symbolic representation, the nature of algorithms, and the possibility of mechanized creativity. She understood that the analytical engine, if built, would not merely compute, it would change the very way humanity interacted with knowledge. Babbage, for all his genius, did not share Ada's broader vision. He was a mathematician and engineer, focused on mechanical precision. Ada was a theorist of the future. She saw the architecture of computing not as engineering, but as logic, a realm where machines could manipulate meaning. She told Babbage that he had created the body of the machine, but she gave it its soul. And in many ways, she was right. Babbage had built the structure. Ada built the concept. Yet even as she explored these ideas, Ada remained deeply human. Her letters reveal longing, vulnerability, and the complex emotional landscape shaped by her relationship to her absent father. She read Byron's poetry, sometimes aloud in her study when she was alone. She wondered whether her imagination belonged to him, whether her brilliance was a gift or a burden inherited through blood. She struggled with the question of identity, whether she belonged to the world of numbers, the world of poetry, or both. Victorian society gave her no clear answer. Her mother discouraged anything that resembled Byron's emotional intensity. The scientific community offered her little recognition, and the broader world saw her as a curiosity, a countess with a strange obsession for mathematics. Ada navigated these contradictions with grace, but they wore on her spirit. She wanted to be taken seriously. She wanted her ideas to matter. She wanted the world to understand what she had discovered. And slowly, quietly, she began to fear that it would not. Near the end of her life, Ada entered a period of profound introspection. Confined often to her room by illness, she revisited her own writings. She read through her notes, tracing the delicate ink she had written years earlier. She annotated her papers, adding clarifications, possibilities, and reflections. Even in her weakened state, her mind continued reaching toward the horizon, searching for patterns, connections, truths that others could not yet see. She dreamed of a future where machines and humans worked together, where machines extended the reach of the mind, not replaced it. She believed that computing would one day help humanity understand the natural world with unprecedented clarity. She imagined a time when machines would assist with music, logic, language, and art, not merely as tools, but as partners in creativity. She saw a future where the essence of thought itself could be encoded, processed, and expanded. But her life was slipping away. By 1852, Ada's health collapsed rapidly. She suffered from a severe illness that Victorian medicine did not fully understand, likely uterine cancer. The pain grew unbearable, the treatments became harsher, and her mother, driven by fear and duty, kept Ada isolated from her closest friends. In those final months, Ada was often alone, without the comfort of Babbage or the intellectual companionship that had shaped her life. Yet even in those last days, she held tightly to her vision. She spoke of the analytical engine, of symbolic logic, of the future she would never see. She whispered ideas to her notebooks, her hands shaking as she wrote. She believed deeply, unwaveringly, that her work mattered. Ada Lovelace passed away at the age of 36. She was buried beside her father, Lord Byron, a man she never knew but whose shadow had always flickered along the edges of her life. Their graves lay side by side, two brilliant minds shaped by different worlds, poetry and mathematics, imagination and logic, expressed in profoundly different ways, yet rooted in the same restless spirit. At the time of her death, Ada's contributions were not fully understood. Her notes faded into obscurity. The analytical engine remained unbuilt, and the world, still clinging to steam and iron, had no language for the ideas she had left behind. But time has a way of catching up to visionaries. A century later, when the first computers emerged, huge rooms filled with blinking lights, switches, and whirring tape, engineers rediscovered her writings. They read her notes with astonishment. They realized that the first computer program had been written 100 years before any computer existed. They understood that the first person to conceive of programmable machines, symbolic processing, and algorithmic logic was not an engineer of the 20th century, but a mathematician from the 19th century. Ada Lovelace, the woman who saw the future long before the world was ready. Her legacy did not arrive boldly or loudly. It arrived quietly, steadily, like a long-delayed sunrise, and the world finally understood. In the years after Ada Lovelace's death, the world moved forward without realizing what it had lost. The Victorian age continued on its path of steam engines, iron bridges, and telegraph wires humming across continents. Factories rose, cities expanded, and new inventions captured public attention. Yet the ideas Ada left behind, delicate, brilliant, centuries ahead, slept quietly inside journals that few people bothered to open. They rested like seeds beneath winter soil, waiting for a future climate that could finally understand them. Even Charles Babbage, her closest collaborator, struggled to carry her legacy forward. His analytical engine project had lost political support, and the scientific community viewed it as an eccentric dream. Babbage continued refining diagrams, perfecting calculations, and mourning the loss of the only person who had truly understood the breadth of his vision. While he had designed the machinery, Ada had seen the soul inside it, the potential that reached beyond mathematics into something almost philosophical. Without her presence, his workshops felt quieter, dimmer. The elegant chaos of gears and brass no longer held the same spark. After Babbage's death in 1871, the world closed the chapter on his engines. The parts that had been built were stored away, some lost, some forgotten. The analytical engine remained an unbuilt dream, a ghost of a machine that never had the chance to reveal its power. And Ada's notes, tucked into academic archives and private collections, faded into near silence. To most scholars of the era, they were nothing more than a clever woman's commentary on a theoretical mechanism. Few saw the structural brilliance hiding beneath her words. But ideas like Ada's do not disappear. They simply drift, waiting for someone who can hear their quiet echo. As the 20th century approached, the world's relationship with machines began to shift. Electricity replaced candlelight, telegraph lines turned into telephone networks, engines moved from steam to combustion, and slowly, humanity's appetite for mechanized systems grew. Factories became more efficient. Cities lit up with artificial light. People began to imagine machines that could handle not just physical labor, but mental tasks as well. Yet it would take decades before technology caught up to Ada's predictions. Around the early 1900s, mathematicians and philosophers began questioning the nature of logic itself. Could reasoning be formalized? Could thought be structured into symbolic systems? And if so, could those systems be manipulated mechanically? These questions echoed Ada's own belief that symbols could be encoded, processed, and transformed. Though no one yet connected their work to hers, the intellectual landscape was beginning to shift in her direction. In small academic circles, discussions about logic machines emerged. Inventors proposed devices to assist with reasoning, though none came close to the conceptual breadth of the analytical engine. Ada's notes remained buried in obscurity, but the world was unknowingly tracing the outlines of her vision. By the 1930s, the shift became undeniable. A group of mathematicians, including Alan Turing and Alonzo Church, explored the concept of computation, the idea that processes could be defined in terms of algorithms. Turing, with his quiet, brilliant mind, conceptualized machines that could manipulate symbols according to rules. These theoretical devices, known later as Turing machines, formed the foundation of computer science. Unbeknownst to him, he was walking the same intellectual path Ada had taken a century earlier. The world, however, was not yet peaceful enough to explore these ideas freely. The shadow of global conflict loomed. As World War II erupted, technology turned toward code-breaking, communication, and urgent needs. Machines became tools of defense. Electronics advanced rapidly under pressure. Giant computing systems were built to decipher encrypted messages. These early computers, rooms full of humming cables and warm circuits, represented the first physical approximation of the machines Ada had imagined. And then, somewhere in the midst of this technological rush, historians revisiting Babbage's work rediscovered a set of writings attributed to Ada Lovelace. At first, the documents were seen as historical curiosities, the musings of a Victorian-era mathematician, but then scholars looked closer. They studied her notes, especially her detailed description of Bernoulli number calculations, and slowly, a quiet astonishment spread through academic circles. Ada's work wasn't commentary. It was architecture. It was theory. It was the world's first example of mechanized symbolic computation. Engineers, historians, and computer scientists began to realize that they were not reading 19th century musings. They were reading the intellectual blueprint of modern computing. Ada had not only understood Babbage's machine, she had taken the concept further than anyone of her time, including Babbage himself. She had defined the possibility of programming, the distinction between hardware and the software, and the idea that machines could operate on symbols beyond numbers. As the computing field expanded, Ada's name rose with it, quietly at first, then steadily. Researchers began citing her work. Universities incorporated her ideas into textbooks. Scholars marveled at the precision, clarity, and prophetic nature of her vision. Slowly, her brilliance returned to life, not in the Victorian salons where she once struggled to be heard, but in the modern world she had so accurately predicted. Throughout the mid-20th century, as computers grew smaller, faster, and more capable, Ada's legacy deepened. Programmers recognized her as the first of their kind. Computer theorists admired her conceptual clarity. Historians and feminists honored her resilience. A woman who saw what others could not, despite the boundaries imposed by her era. Her life became a symbol, not only of intellect, but of perseverance. And yet, even as Ada gained recognition, her story retained its quietness. It was not a tale of public triumph or loud accolades. It was a story of ideas carried across generations, whispered from one century to the next. Her influence expanded not through monuments or speeches, but through the quiet glow of computer screens, the logic of algorithms, and the symbolic language of programming. As modern computing blossomed in the latter half of the century, Ada's predictions became eerily accurate. Machines composed music, algorithms analyzed patterns in nature, computers assisted in scientific research, business, art, communication. They operated on symbols, letters, sounds, shapes, exactly as Ada had envisioned. Her belief that machines could handle abstract information had become a foundational truth of the digital age. In the 1970s, a new programming language was named ADA in her honor. Designed for large mission-critical systems, it paid homage not only to her mathematical ability, but to her visionary understanding of programming as structured, logical, and precise. The language became widely used by the U.S. Department of Defense, symbolic of the reliability and foresight Ada herself embodied. Through this language, her name entered the global technological world, not as a historical footnote, but as a living part of modern computation. By the early 21st century, Ada Lovelace had become not only a figure of scientific admiration, but an inspiration for women in technology. Her story became a beacon for those who felt constrained by circumstance, proving that brilliance could flourish even in the most unlikely conditions. Schools celebrated her. Students learned about her algorithms. Organizations created Ada Lovelace Day to honor women in STEM fields. Her life became a reminder that innovation can come from quiet minds, curious minds, and minds that refuse to see the world as it is. Today, Ada's legacy lives everywhere, in smartphones, satellites, medical systems, music software, artificial intelligence. Every line of code, every digital process, every symbolic transformation in modern computing carries a faint echo of her imagination. She did not witness the world she envisioned, but she shaped it profoundly. And her work continues to guide the future. As artificial intelligence grows, as algorithms learn, as machines expand their capabilities, Ada's ideas remain a compass. She believed that machines could extend the human mind, not replace it, and it is a belief still carried by the most thoughtful engineers and philosophers of our time. Her poetical science lives in every attempt to unify creativity and computation, every effort to build technology that reflects the complexity of human thought. Ada Lovelace's legacy is not loud. It is steady. It is luminous. It is woven into the invisible systems that guide modern life. The code she left behind, both literal and conceptual, continues to unfold, line by line, generation by generation, until her vision becomes not just a prophecy, but a reality shared by all. For more than a century after Ada Lovelace died, the world moved steadily toward the future she had once imagined, yet it did so without uttering her name. Her notes lay buried in the archives of scientific societies, their pages gradually fading, but never losing the strange power carried within them. Scholars of the 19th century saw them as curiosities, the work of a countess, with an unusual interest in mathematics. The early engineers of the 20th century barely glanced at them, focused instead on building physical machines rather than contemplating their theoretical foundations. But ideas, even forgotten ones, have their own patience. They wait for the world to grow into them. The first hints of Ada's resurgence began quietly in the early 1900s when historians revisited the work of Charles Babbage. His engines, once dismissed as eccentric fantasies, began to look strangely prophetic. The growing interest in symbolic logic made his mechanical diagrams appear less like dreams and more like early prototypes of a new kind of intellectual machinery. As academics studied Babbage more deeply, Ada's name surfaced again, the young woman who had translated Menabrea's paper and added the famous notes. Even then, few understood the scale of what she had written, but the seed had been disturbed. Her resurrection had begun. Then came the dawn of the computing age. In the 1930s and 1940s, as mathematicians like Alan Turing and John von Neumann laid the foundations of computer science, Ada's writings began appearing in footnotes and academic references. Scholars reading her papers for the first time were startled by her clarity. They found themselves encountering ideas that matched and sometimes even surpassed the theories emerging in their own time. A Victorian woman, writing by candlelight in flowing skirts, had predicted programmable computation with a precision no one expected. It was during this period that Ada's story caught the attention of a growing number of historians, computer theorists, and philosophers. They pored over her letters, her notebooks, her marginal annotations, and they found something startling. Ada had not simply described Babbage's machine. She had described the nature of computation itself. She had articulated the difference between hardware and software. She had envisioned symbolic processing, and she had done it not with the cold detachment of a statistician, but with the poetic imagination of someone who saw numbers as living structures. Historians began to ask the question, who was she? What sort of mind could have reached so far beyond its century? What gave her the ability to see the future so clearly when everyone around her remained rooted in the past? These questions led to a deeper exploration of Ada's life, her childhood training in mathematics, her relationship with Byron, her illnesses, her visionary imagination, her partnership with Babbage, and the relentless discipline imposed by her mother. Scholars realized that Ada was a convergence of contradictions, a poet's daughter with a mathematician's mind, a noblewoman with analytical intensity, a Victorian woman shaped by constraints yet able to imagine boundless freedom. Her genius did not emerge despite these contradictions, but because of them. By the 1950s, Ada Lovelace's reputation began taking shape. Academic conferences referenced her theories. Her notes were republished. Her understanding of symbolic logic, long overlooked, was recognized as one of the earliest conceptual frameworks for general-purpose computing. A century after her death, she was finally finding her place in the intellectual story she had helped create. Then came the 1960s and 1970s, decades of rapid technological advancement. Computers were no longer room-sized machines used only by governments. They were becoming tools for science, business, and, in time, ordinary life. With each advancement, Ada's work grew more relevant. Computer languages evolved. Programmers emerged as architects of a new digital world. And in 1979, when the U.S. Department of Defense created a new programming language for critical systems, they named it ADA, honoring the woman who had written the world's first algorithm. This moment became a symbolic rebirth. Ada Lovelace was no longer just a historical curiosity. She had become a foundational figure, the first programmer, the mother of computing, the one who gave voice to the idea of mechanized thought. Universities adopted her story. Textbooks featured her name. An entire generation of computer scientists learned about the elegant logic she wrote more than a century earlier, yet her cultural revival ran even deeper than her technical influence. In an age when women were still fighting for recognition in STEM fields, Ada became a symbol of what had always been possible and what society had long ignored. Her story resonated with women who saw themselves in her curiosity, her constraints, and her refusal to be defined by the limits imposed on her. Schools began celebrating Ada Lovelace Day, a global event honoring women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In this wave of rediscovery, Ada transformed from a forgotten historical figure into an icon, not because she fit neatly into the mold of a pioneer, but because she didn't. She had lived too early, seen too far, and paid the price of genius expressed in a world that could not understand it. Her life became a reminder of how many minds had gone unnoticed, how many ideas had been dismissed, and how many futures were delayed because the world was not ready to hear them. As the digital age matured, Ada's influence deepened. Her belief in poetical science, the union of logic and imagination, resonated with modern thinkers exploring the boundaries of AI, creativity, and machine cognition. She had argued that machines might one day create art, music, or representations of thought. Today, these predictions unfold daily in the fields of machine learning, algorithmic composition, and generative models. Ada had not only predicted the structure of computation, she had predicted its spirit. The quiet resurrection of Ada Lovelace did more than restore her to history. It reshaped how the world understood the relationship between creativity and technology. Her writings proved that innovation often comes from voices at the margins, from dreamers with unusual perspectives, from minds unbound by tradition, from people who see connections others overlook. In a sense, Ada had never belonged fully to her own century. Her thoughts reached too far. Her imagination stood too tall. Her ideas needed the world to evolve before they could breathe. And when that world finally arrived, filled with circuits, code, screens, and systems, her voice rose again as if it had been waiting patiently beneath the noise of 100 years. Today, when a programmer writes a line of code, when a researcher builds an algorithm, when artificial intelligence analyzes patterns or creates art, Ada Lovelace's fingerprints linger quietly in the background. She is present in the architecture of computation, in the elegance of algorithms, in the belief that machines can manipulate meaning, not just numbers. Her resurrection is not one of monuments or statues. It is one of influence, one of ideas, one of invisible threads woven into the fabric of the digital world. Ada Lovelace's genius was not loud, nor was her impact immediate. It was patient, it was enduring, and it changed everything. Long after Ada Lovelace's writings resurfaced in academic halls, something subtle but extraordinary began to happen. The modern world, with its blinking machines, singing circuits, and oceans of digital information, started to feel eerily familiar to her old notes. Engineers reading her work were struck not just by her technical insight, but by the way she described machines as more than mechanisms. She wrote of them as abstract thinkers, as symbolic partners, as engines capable of weaving patterns the way looms weave flowers. It was as if she'd been listening to the hum of computers a century before electricity shaped them. The deeper scientists studied Ada's writings, the more they realized how far she had reached. She had not merely predicted programmable computation. She had glimpsed modern concepts of abstraction, modularity, recursion, and even creativity. And though computers had now become tangible, humming softly in offices, research labs, and the growing world of personal computing, Ada's vision continued to echo through the evolution of the field. Her notes were no longer academic curiosities. They had become philosophical compasses guiding what machines could become. By the late 20th century, the world was waking up to a digital dawn. Microprocessors shrank to the size of a fingernail. Memory expanded at exponential rates. Programming languages blossomed, each carrying Ada's structural DNA. Universities taught computational theory based on principles she articulated long ago. And through this transformation, the quiet understanding grew that the modern world was not merely building machines, it was finally inhabiting the landscape Ada had sketched so delicately in ink. In this new world, the nature of thought itself began to shift. People wondered whether machines could generate ideas, express creativity, or understand the symbols they manipulated. Philosophers explored questions about consciousness and computation. Artists experimented with algorithmic music and digital art, unaware that Ada had written centuries earlier that machines might one day compose harmonies or craft visual patterns. As digital art emerged, her prediction stopped feeling mystical. It felt inevitable, a future she had seen because she understood that computation was not limited by arithmetic, but empowered by imagination. The digital revolution brought challenges Ada could never have predicted: global networks, cybersecurity, ethics of automation. Yet even here, Her insights proved unexpectedly relevant. She had written about the responsibility inherent in creating machines capable of symbolic manipulation. She warned that misinterpreting the power of such tools could lead to misuse or misunderstanding. Her words, once dismissed as poetic abstractions, became strangely prophetic in an age grappling with algorithms that influence societies, economies, and personal lives. Meanwhile, historians continued piecing together the human side of Ada's story. They found letters revealing her struggles with loneliness, illness, and expectations that pressed heavily against her. They discovered diary entries filled with longing for intellectual companionship. And they uncovered the complex emotional landscape she navigated, torn between the structured world her mother wanted for her and the imaginative storms inherited from her father. These details gave new depth to her genius, proving her brilliance wasn't born in ideal conditions, but carved through adversity. Researchers began to see Ada not as a flawless prodigy, but as a profoundly human figure, brilliant, fragile, passionate, and brave. Her health challenges became a point of empathy rather than weakness. Her emotional intensity, once feared by her mother, became part of the story that made her visionary perspective possible, and her isolation, once a private pain, became part of the reason her ideas wandered freely into territories untouched by the minds around her. As the 21st century unfolded, technology grew increasingly intertwined with daily life. Smartphones became extensions of memory. Software shaped conversations, decisions, and dreams. Artificial intelligence emerged, capable of recognizing patterns, composing music, and generating language. With each advancement, Ada's writing seemed to glow a little brighter. Her predictions felt less like guesses and more like glimpses of a truth she had understood intuitively. That computation was not just machinery, but a new form of expression. In conferences and classrooms, scholars began reading her poetic descriptions aloud, her metaphors comparing machines to looms, her visions of symbolic processing, her belief that numbers were merely shadows of ideas. Students listened in awe, realizing that the frameworks guiding their modern world had been outlined by a woman writing with quill and ink in an era lit only by candlelight. Ada's story became a bridge between past and future, showing that innovation always begins with imagination. Her influence spread beyond computer science. Writers saw her as a literary figure bridging poetry and mathematics. Musicians saw her as a symbol of algorithmic composition. Visual artists used her life as inspiration for digital installations exploring code, structure, and creativity. And philosophers debated her ideas about the relationship between human thought and machine logic. Ada had become more than a programmer. She had become a lens through which people understood the nature of creativity itself. Yet, as her fame grew, a quieter question lingered beneath the surface. What would Ada have thought of this world? Would she have been astonished by the processing power in a smartphone? Would she have felt vindicated by the algorithms analyzing vast oceans of data? Would she have embraced artificial intelligence as a realization of her poetical science? Scholars debated these questions endlessly, but there was one truth they all agreed on. Ada would have recognized this world as kin to her imagination. She would have understood the abstract beauty in systems invisible to the eye. She would have appreciated the harmony in algorithmic music. She would have marveled at the complexity of artificial learning. And she would have continued asking the same question that defined her life: what else is possible? In this way, Ada remained not a relic, but a companion to modern discovery. Her writings continued shaping how programmers saw themselves, not just as engineers, but as creators. Her metaphors encouraged them to explore, to imagine, to blur the lines between art and logic. And in the growing world of AI, her belief in the potential of machine creativity became a guiding principle. Her legacy, however, was not only intellectual, it was deeply emotional. Ada became a symbol for anyone who felt ahead of their time, anyone whose imagination did not fit the world around them, anyone who lived in the tension between constraint and possibility. She represented the courage to think differently, to embrace ideas others dismissed, and to believe that imagination could shape the future. One of the most profound aspects of Ada's legacy emerged quietly: the recognition that ideas do not always bloom within the lifetime of their creators. Some ideas need decades of technological evolution, cultural change, and intellectual maturity before they can flourish. Ada became the ultimate symbol of delayed brilliance, a reminder that the worth of an idea is not diminished by the world's inability to understand it. And so, her name began appearing everywhere: in textbooks, in coding academies, in university halls, in global celebrations of women in STEM, and in the quiet admiration of programmers who wrote algorithms long after midnight. Her influence became woven into the silent language of computing, carried in every loop, every function, every symbolic representation processed by machines across the world. Today, when someone writes a line of code, when a machine analyzes data, when a computer composes a piece of music or recognizes a pattern, a piece of Ada's vision is there, softly, invisibly, undeniably. Her legacy is not carved in marble or etched in monuments. It is encoded in logic. It is embedded in the architecture of machines. It is whispered in every digital process that shapes modern life. Ada Lovelace imagined machines that could think, create, and explore ideas, and the world, and slowly, steadily, became the one she dreamed. As the digital age matured, Ada Lovelace's presence began to feel not like a rediscovered story, but like a quiet foundation the modern world had been unconsciously standing on for decades. The machines she once envisioned now sat in millions of homes, humming softly on desks and glowing gently in the palms of people's hands. The abstract engines she had theorized, devices that could manipulate symbols, compose music, interpret language, had become ordinary parts of daily life. And with each passing year, her legacy grew less like a historical curiosity and more like a living spirit woven through the circuitry of the modern world. In universities, students studied her notes not simply as historical documents, but as philosophical texts that articulated the very essence of computation. They marveled at her clarity, her depth, and the intuition she possessed about how machines might one day behave. Professors spoke of her not just as the first programmer, but as one of the first theorists to understand computation as a universal process, something that could extend beyond arithmetic into the realm of imagination. Her ideas were used not only to teach history, but to inspire creativity in future engineers, encouraging them to think of code as something more than instructions, something more like art. And in this growing appreciation, Ada's own words found new life. Her belief in poetical science, the marriage of imagination and logic, resonated deeply in a century where technology and creativity coexisted in ways she had predicted with impossible accuracy. The artists of the digital age saw her as a symbol of innovation without boundaries. Musicians using algorithmic composition techniques cited her vision. Dancers created performances inspired by her metaphors of weaving algebraic patterns. Filmmakers created documentaries, animations, and immersive installations dedicated to her life and her legacy. Ada became a muse, not just to scientists, but to creators across disciplines. Meanwhile, computer scientists saw her legacy reflected in everyday tools. The symbolic logic she described in her notes became the backbone of programming languages. The idea that machines could transform information, not simply process it, echoed through the development of artificial intelligence. Her conceptual insight that a machine might one day analyze patterns in nature or compose music lived on in programs that wrote symphonies, designed graphics, and solved complex problems. Every new computational breakthrough, no matter how distant from her era, carried an echo of her earliest predictions. And yet, behind all this modern brilliance, Ada remained undeniably human. Scholars continued to uncover letters that revealed her inner life, her doubts, her fears, her vulnerability, and her relentless longing to understand herself and the world. These letters painted a portrait of a woman shaped by contradiction, a poet's passion wrapped in mathematical discipline, a visionary in an era that feared female intellect, a brilliant mind trapped in a delicate body. As more of her correspondence became public, people connected not just to her ideas, but to her humanity. Her challenges, the loneliness, the illness, the emotional storms, became part of the tapestry of admiration. In her struggles, many found comfort. They saw in Ada a reminder that genius and difficulty often walk hand in hand, that brilliance does not require perfection, and that some of the most important ideas in history were born in moments of uncertainty, pain, or solitude. Ada's story became a reminder that even fragile minds can dream powerful dreams. By the mid-21st century, Ada's name appeared everywhere. She became a symbol on posters celebrating women in STEM. She appeared in children's books introducing young readers to the world of coding. Her face appeared in murals on university campuses, painted in luminous colors that blended poetry and circuitry. And every year, on Ada Lovelace Day, people around the world gathered to celebrate her vision and to honor the countless women who followed in her path, pushing science and technology forward in ways Ada would have understood deeply. But as her external recognition grew, something more profound happened inside the hearts of those who studied her legacy. People realized Ada had not simply predicted the future of machines, she had predicted the future of human creativity. She had taught the world that logic and imagination were not opposites, but partners. That creativity was not limited to art nor logic to machinery. That the world's greatest innovations came from the meeting of the two. As artificial intelligence developed, Ada's ideas gained even more relevance. Engineers designing intelligent systems referenced her belief that machines could one day manipulate symbols in ways that resembled human thought. Philosophers exploring machine consciousness quoted her metaphors. Even leaders in ethics and policy looked to her writings for guidance on how to balance technological progress with responsibility, something Ada had hinted at long before such conversations were necessary. Her belief that machines might one day augment human creativity became a grounding principle for entire fields of technology. And her fear of misinterpreting the power of symbolic machines, a subtle warning woven through her writings, became essential in debates about automation, ethics, and the boundaries between human intuition and artificial reasoning. It became clear that Ada's legacy did not lie simply in what she predicted, but in how she taught the world to think about computing as a human endeavor, shaped by imagination, responsibility, and empathy. She understood something modern engineers continued to grapple with, that the power of machines does not replace the human mind, it extends it. Through all this recognition, Ada's presence felt strangely alive, almost contemporary. Her letters, once written in a looping Victorian script, now read like the thoughts of someone who understood the 21st century more deeply than her own. Her ideas, once called fanciful, now served as reference points for cutting-edge research. Her frameworks shaped software engineering, algorithm design, and computational creativity. And in the hum of servers, the glow of screens, the silent rush of information across fiber optic cables, many felt her quiet echo, the whisper of a mind that had reached across centuries. In this landscape of recognition, scholars began to revisit a question that had lingered since her death. Why did Ada see so far? What allowed her to look beyond the mechanical structures of her time and imagine symbolic machines that could think, create, and solve problems beyond arithmetic? Why did she understand computation not as a tool, but as a new kind of language, a universal medium for expressing logic and imagination? Perhaps it was the unusual education her mother crafted, a rigorous training in mathematics meant to anchor Ada's inherited imagination. Perhaps it was her own relentless curiosity, which refused to accept boundaries or limitations. Perhaps it was her isolation, the lonely spaces that allowed her imagination to roam unchecked. Or perhaps it was the combination of these forces shaping her into someone uniquely capable of bridging the worlds of poetry and logic. Whatever the reason, the world eventually adopted her way of seeing. As programming evolved into a global language, as digital art flourished, as artificial intelligence began to reshape society, Ada's concept of poetical science became more relevant than ever. Programmers began to see themselves not simply as technicians, but as creators weaving patterns of logic. Artists began to see computation as a new kind of brush. Philosophers began to consider algorithms as expressions of thought. Ada Lovelace stood at the center of all of this, not as a ghost of the past, but as a guiding light for the future. Today, her influence flows quietly through the very structure of modern life. When a child learns to program, Ada stands beside them. When a researcher builds a new algorithm, Ada's logic shapes their work. When a musician uses a computer to generate harmonies, Ada's vision sings in the background. When a machine learns to analyze language, Ada's predictions breathe through its code. Her legacy is not a monument of stone or metal. It is a living algorithm, woven silently through servers, software circuits, and imagination. A glow of thought that began in a quiet Victorian room lit by candlelight and now illuminates an entire digital world. Ada Lovelace did not live to see the future she imagined, but the future, softly, steadily, beautifully, became the one she had dreamed. By the time the 21st century fully unfolded, Ada Lovelace's legacy had expanded far beyond the world of programming languages and computer laboratories. She had become a symbol woven into a much larger tapestry, a tapestry made of innovation, imagination, creativity, and the subtle interplay between human thought and machine logic. Her presence lingered beneath the surface of modern life like a soft rhythm, a pattern in the background that shaped the way people understood the digital world. It was not just her ideas that influenced the future, but the way she had dared to think, to imagine, to ask questions her era could not contain. As the global digital landscape grew more complex, Ada's name appeared in places she never could have expected. Museums curated exhibitions dedicated to her life, displaying her letters, diagrams, and notebooks under gentle, protective light. Schools around the world introduced children to computation by telling her story, teaching them that the world's first programmer had been a young woman who loved patterns, poetry, and possibility. And in the quiet corners of the internet, programmers wrote tributes to her on forums, blogs, and late-night threads, thanking her for a vision that had shaped careers, passions, and entire fields of study. Her life story found a unique resonance in the rising movement aimed at closing the gender gap in technology. Organizations began using Ada's name to inspire women and girls to pursue computer science, engineering, and mathematics. Her face appeared on posters, her quotes were shared across social media, and her influence became a rallying point for those who believed that intelligence should never be constrained by social expectation. She had lived in a world that discouraged her curiosity, yet she had imagined a world built by it. Modern audiences saw her as a beacon, a reminder that brilliance does not need permission. Meanwhile, researchers studying creativity and computation revisited Ada's concept of poetical science. They began exploring how logic and imagination intertwined in disciplines like machine learning, data visualization, and digital art. Ada had believed that mathematics could reveal hidden architectures of the universe, and that symbols could be manipulated in ways that mirrored human intuition. In her vision, computation was not mechanical, but expressive. This concept became central in modern debates about artificial intelligence, whether machines could understand, whether they could create, and whether their output could ever approach the nuance of human imagination. In these conversations, Ada's writings emerged like a quiet guidepost. She had insisted that machines could only do what we ordered them to do, yet she also believed that machines could express patterns that humans might not recognize on their own. She saw computation as a collaboration, a dance between human intent and mechanical precision. And in the age of AI, that dance became more intricate than ever. As machine learning advanced, algorithms began producing surprises: melodies, stories, artworks, predictions, designs. Some saw these developments as steps toward artificial creativity. Others saw them as reflections of the data humans had provided. But no matter the perspective, Ada's vision loomed over the conversation. She had predicted that machines might one day compose complex music, and now they did. She suggested machines could manipulate patterns beyond human comprehension, and now algorithms analyzed data sets too large for any single mind. Her belief in symbolic expression had become a foundation of cognitive science. Yet, despite her towering intellectual legacy, modern society also grew fond of the personal stories behind Ada's work. People wanted to know how she lived, how she learned, how she struggled. They wanted to understand the human behind the ideas. Biographers painted vivid portraits of her early education, the strict lessons, the isolation, the intense pressure to suppress her imagination. They wrote about her conflicted relationship with her parents, the mathematician mother who feared emotion, and the poet father she never met. And they revealed the emotional storms Ada navigated, storms that shaped her creativity as much as her logic. These human details transformed Ada from an abstract historical figure into a deeply relatable one. Readers saw a young woman who loved poetry, who questioned everything, who felt torn between the expectations of society and the landscape of her own mind. They saw a woman who navigated illness, restriction, and self-doubt, and yet still produced ideas so vast they transcended her lifetime. Ada's resilience became a quiet lesson that brilliance often emerges from the tension between limitation and possibility. Academic interest in Ada's work also led to a surge of research into early computing concepts. Scholars reconstructed Babbage's analytical engine using modern simulations, confirming that Ada's algorithms would have worked exactly as she described. Some researchers even built mechanical replicas of portions of the engine, allowing museum visitors to watch gears and levers execute the logic Ada had envisioned. These replicas were mesmerizing, not only because of their mechanical elegance, but because they were physical expressions of Ada's abstract ideas. Visitors watched the gears turn and felt the stirrings of her imagination come alive. In classrooms, teachers began using Ada's notes to explore foundational concepts in computer science. Students were surprised by how modern her ideas felt. They studied her descriptions of loops, conditions, and symbolic manipulation. They analyzed her speculation about machine creativity, and they recognized that Ada's framework offered a timeless way to think about algorithms, not as rigid sequences, but as expressions of intent and structure. Many students found that Ada's combination of precision and poetry made programming feel more human, more approachable. Her influence expanded across the arts as well. Writers explored her life in novels, placing her at the intersection of genius and Victorian constraint. Composers wrote music inspired by her algorithms. Visual artists created digital tapestries, weaving her lines of code with abstract patterns. Theater productions brought her story to life on stage, often emphasizing the contrast between her Victorian environment and her futuristic vision. In these works, Ada became a character of imagination, someone who belonged to multiple worlds, tied to none. As her cultural presence grew, scholars began to reflect on why Ada's story resonated so deeply in the modern world. They concluded that her appeal lay not only in her intellectual brilliance, but in her role as a symbol of what it means to think beyond one's era. Ada's mind had not been constrained by the limitations of her world. She had looked into the future and seen something no one else could. And in doing so, she embodied the essence of innovation. Her story encouraged people to question convention, to embrace curiosity, to believe in possibilities that seemed impossible. She became a reminder that ideas do not need immediate validation to matter. They can wait quietly for the world to catch up. And sometimes the most powerful ideas are the ones that are least understood at first. This recognition led to a more nuanced understanding of Ada's legacy. People realized that her life was not a simple triumph of genius, but a complex interplay of brilliance, doubt, illness, discipline, and imagination. She did not succeed because she had perfect clarity. She succeeded because she pursued clarity with relentless dedication. She did not predict the future because she was lucky. She predicted it because she saw patterns others could not. As the digital century progressed, Ada's influence continued to evolve. Philosophers began exploring her ideas in the context of artificial consciousness. Artists interpreted her work through interactive installations that responded to sound, movement, and code. Psychologists studied her writings to understand the cognitive processes behind visionary thinking. Engineers designing human-machine interfaces looked to her perspective on symbolic manipulation as a framework for creating intuitive systems. In these converging fields, Ada Lovelace became more than a historical figure. She became a metaphor, a symbol of imagination transcending boundaries, of intelligence shaped by emotion and intuition, of technology guided by human creativity. Her life demonstrated that innovation blooms where logic and imagination meet, and that the future belongs to those who can hold both. Even in the quiet corners of modern life, when someone wrote a program late at night, or when a machine generated a melody, or when a child built their first algorithm, Ada's spirit seemed to linger, not as a ghost, but as a gentle reminder that ideas can outlive their creators, that imagination can echo across centuries, and that the universe of thought is boundless. Her influence had become a kind of light, soft, steady, woven through the fabric of modern existence. As Ada Lovelace's name wove itself deeper into the modern imagination, her influence began to resemble something quietly universal, a thread stretching across time, binding together fields that once seemed distant from one another. Computer scientists, artists, mathematicians, philosophers, and innovators all felt a subtle connection to her story. They found pieces of themselves in her curiosity, her contradictions, her struggles, and her visions. And as technology advanced, Ada's ideas became guideposts, not only for what machines could do, but for what humanity could aspire to become. The world around her legacy grew increasingly complex. Machines that once performed simple calculations now interpreted languages, recognized faces, and analyzed vast oceans of information. Networks stretched across the globe, sending messages between continents in fractions of a second. Data poured into clouds of servers storing memories and ideas with a persistence no human mind could match. Yet in all this complexity, Ada's foundational belief remained clear, that computation was a form of expressed thought, symbolic, structural, and open to endless creative possibilities. This understanding became essential as artificial intelligence matured. Engineers and researchers found themselves wrestling with questions Ada had hinted at long ago. What is the nature of thought? Can creativity be encoded? Do patterns have meaning beyond human interpretation? Her idea of poetical science, the blending of imagination and logical structure, became a compass for those exploring the frontiers of machine learning. In conferences, journals, and philosophical debates, Ada's metaphors were frequently quoted. The weaving of algebraic patterns, once poetic, now became a literal description of how computers learned, analyzed, and generated new content. As institutions adopted her story, her name became intertwined with movements dedicated to expanding access to education and technology. Programs designed to teach coding to young children often used Ada's story as an introduction. Educators found that children connected to her narrative. The girl who loved numbers, the young woman who imagined what machines could become, the thinker who saw logic as a form of artistry. Students found courage in the fact that Ada's brilliance emerged not from convention, but from curiosity. In many classrooms, her story was accompanied by hands-on exercises. Children learned to create simple algorithms while hearing about the first algorithm ever written. They manipulated symbols on screens, unknowingly echoing Ada's early ideas about symbolic processing, and in their laughter, their discoveries, and their first steps into computational thinking, Ada's influence took on a new life, no longer bound to history, but woven into the experiences of future generations. Meanwhile, the academic world continued re-examining Ada's work with evolving perspectives. Scholars exploring the history of science began asking deeper questions about the nature of recognition and legacy. Why had Ada's work been overlooked for so long? How many other voices, especially those of women and marginalized thinkers, had contributed to scientific ideas without receiving proper credit? Ada's rediscovery illuminated broader patterns, revealing how history often misses its most visionary minds, only to rediscover them when the world is finally ready. This led to an increased interest in uncovering forgotten contributions in science and technology. Historians used Ada's story as a catalyst to explore the hidden architects of computation, communication, and invention. And so, in a quiet way, Ada helped bring other forgotten figures into the light, a ripple effect of recognition spreading through time. As her story inspired more and more people, Ada became a symbol of perseverance, not the loud, triumphant kind, but a soft, enduring resilience that echoed the quiet strength she had shown in her own life. The more people learned about her struggles, her battles with illness, her emotional volatility, the societal constraints she faced, the more they understood that brilliance does not bloom in simple conditions. It transforms difficulty into depth, restriction into creativity, uncertainty into insight. In this way, Ada became a companion to anyone who had ever felt out of place in their own era. She became a comfort to innovators whose ideas felt too large, too strange, or too early for the world around them. Her story whispered to them that imagination sometimes outpaces reality, that visionaries often stand alone at the edges of understanding, and that genius may lie not in acceptance, but in persistence. This emotional connection to Ada deepened as new forms of computational creativity emerged. Machines could now write poetry, paint images, compose music, and generate narratives. Many of these developments drew directly from the theoretical foundations she had described. Researchers pointed to her description of the analytical engine as a poetical science, a phrase that now felt prophetic. They acknowledged that the line between human and machine creativity had become softer, more collaborative, more intertwined. Ada's early recognition that machines could manipulate symbols in ways that transcended arithmetic became the central idea behind symbolic AI. Her description of algorithms as patterns woven through mechanical processes became the foundation of generative models, and her interest in musical expression found new life as computers composed symphonies, harmonies, and evolving soundscapes. In the world of modern art, creators embraced Ada as a patron of computational aesthetics. Artists working with code often cited her vision when discussing the philosophical nature of their craft. Some installations included projected animations of her notes, her handwriting flowing across walls like living code. Others used AI to create generative artworks inspired by her metaphors. And in galleries filled with softly glowing screens, observers felt the strange intimacy of her presence, the sense that she stood at the intersection of past and future, guiding creative minds across the decades. The cultural landscape around Ada grew richer each year. Documentaries explored her life, often emphasizing the duality between her fragility and her genius. Novelists reimagined her world, weaving fiction with history to capture the emotion behind her ideas. Musicians created scores inspired by her concepts, blending algorithmic patterns with human performance. And even in digital gaming, Ada appeared as a character, guiding players through puzzles based on logic, symbols, and imagination. Through all of this, a fundamental question lingered. What does it mean to think? Ada's work encouraged scholars to explore the difference between computation and consciousness. They debated whether machines could truly understand, or whether they only manipulated symbols according to rules. They asked whether creativity required emotion, intention, or awareness, or whether it could emerge from pure structure. Ada's own writings hinted at a nuanced view, suggesting that machines could assist in creativity without replicating human emotion. Her perspective became especially valuable as AI advanced into realms she once speculated about, composing original music, generating novel ideas, and writing coherent text. Researchers looked to Ada's belief in collaboration between human and machine rather than competition. She had envisioned machines extending the mind, not replacing it. And as the world grappled with questions about automation, Ada's view offered a more hopeful perspective, one where imagination and logic combined to create new forms of expression. Even outside academia, people found personal meaning in Ada's story. Innovators struggling with ideas that seemed ahead of their time took comfort in the knowledge that Ada had faced similar isolation. Artists who saw patterns in language or numbers found kinship in her descriptions of algebraic beauty, and individuals drawn to both creativity and structure saw Ada as a reminder that the two could coexist harmoniously. Her influence stretched into quiet, unexpected moments. A young student writing their first program late at night noticed beauty in the logic and felt Ada's legacy in that discovery. A musician experimenting with generative algorithms heard the echo of Ada's vision in the unfolding harmonies. A scientist analyzing complex data sets felt the elegance of symbolic processing Ada had once described. These private moments, scattered across countless lives, formed a silent network of admiration that spanned the world. Ada's legacy also extended into personal identity. People who felt pulled between multiple worlds, between art and science, emotion and logic, tradition and imagination, often saw themselves reflected in her story. Ada embodied the truth that identity can be multifaceted, that belonging is not defined by a single path, and that the most powerful ideas emerge from the intersections where different dimensions of thought collide. In modern discussions about technology, Ada's name remained a calming presence, a reminder that innovation requires care, empathy, and imagination. She encouraged creators to consider not only the power of computation, but the responsibility that accompanies it. She encouraged thinkers to explore new possibilities without abandoning humanity. And she encouraged the world to honor the quiet minds whose ideas shape the future in ways that often go unnoticed. Through all the echoes of her influence, in machines, in art, in humans, Ada Lovelace became something more than a historical figure. She became an invisible thread running through the fabric of innovation, a reminder that ideas are timeless, that imagination is powerful, and that possibility often begins with a question. And as the digital world continued to expand, her voice, gentle, visionary, unwavering, invited the next generation to ask, what else can we imagine? And how far can our ideas go? As the 21st century advanced into its middle decades, Ada Lovelace's influence no longer felt like something rediscovered from the past. It felt like something quietly guiding the future. The world had become a network of digital threads, vast systems of communication, computation, and creativity flowing through cables and satellites like artificial rivers. Information moved faster than thought. Machines processed symbols at speeds no human mind could keep pace with. And yet, beneath all the rapid innovation, there was a stillness, a foundation that seemed to whisper the same truth Ada once wrote in her notes, that machines were, in a sense, extensions of human imagination. This realization shaped not only the field of computing, but the culture around it. In offices lit by the soft glow of monitors, in classrooms where children learned to code before they learned to write cursive, in research labs exploring the next frontiers of artificial intelligence, Ada's spirit lingered like a quiet companion. Her belief that logic could be beautiful, that structure could be poetic, and that machines could reflect the creativity of the human mind resonated with a world increasingly defined by its digital heartbeat. It was as if the age she had envisioned had finally come into full bloom. Engineers and scientists, building on decades of progress, pushed computation into realms Ada could not have directly predicted, but ones she would have understood intuitively. Quantum computing emerged, replacing traditional bits with qubits that dance between states like flickering stars. These new machines did not simply compute faster, they computed differently, exploring possibilities in parallel, revealing patterns that had been unreachable with classical logic. Researchers explained these concepts using metaphors Ada herself might have loved: superposition as a harmony of states, entanglement as a woven relationship across space. And in these explorations, Ada's conceptual framework, her idea that machines could manipulate symbolic patterns far beyond arithmetic, became even more relevant. Quantum algorithms, built on principles completely foreign to Victorian mathematics, still followed the conceptual spirit Ada had captured in her notes. They treated computation as structure, pattern, and possibility. They used symbolic relationships that echoed her early descriptions of algebraic weaving. Even at the pinnacle of modern science, Ada remained present. Artificial intelligence, too, entered a new era. Early models that recognized patterns evolved into systems capable of generating text, art, music, and ideas. Machines learned not only from data, but from context and nuance. They became partners in creativity, tools that offered suggestions, completed sentences, painted images, and formulated theories. Some people feared these developments, imagining a world where machines might overshadow their creators. But Ada's vision offered another perspective, that machines were not rivals for creativity, but amplifiers of it. This perspective gained traction as artists embraced AI. Painters collaborated with generative algorithms that translated brushstrokes into evolving compositions. Writers used language models to explore new styles and perspectives. Musicians used neural networks to generate harmonies that felt both familiar and entirely new. In these creative partnerships, Ada's fingerprints were unmistakable. Her belief that computation could become a medium of expression, not merely calculation, echoed through every digital brushstroke, every algorithmic harmony. In museums and galleries around the world, exhibitions explored the relationship between creativity and code. Visitors stood in front of screens where digital artworks blossomed in real time, responsive to sound, movement, and emotion. They walked through rooms where light patterns shifted according to data streams. They listened to music composed by algorithms trained on centuries of composition. Many of these installations referenced Ada directly, projecting her writings, her diagrams, her metaphors across walls and ceilings, allowing modern audiences to walk inside her vision. But even in the glow of her rising influence, scholars continued studying the quieter aspects of her life. They explored her personal struggles with illness, her conflicts with her mother, her emotional intensity, and her profound sense of isolation. These studies provided depth to her genius, revealing a woman who had not simply been brilliant but resilient, a thinker who wrestled with limits and still reached beyond them. A mind shaped not only by intellectual training, but by longing, imagination, and restlessness. For many, this made Ada's story even more compelling. She became not only a symbol of intellectual achievement, but a reminder of the humanity at the heart of innovation. Her vulnerability made her brilliance relatable. Her contradictions made her inspiring, and her story encouraged people to embrace their own complexities, reminding them that creativity thrives not in perfection, but in the spaces between discipline and imagination. As computational systems grew more advanced, the questions Ada first hinted at became increasingly urgent. Philosophers debated whether machines could understand the symbols they manipulated. Cognitive scientists explored whether creativity required consciousness. Ethicists considered the responsibilities of those building the digital future. And through all these debates, Ada's writings appeared again and again, thoughtful, reflective, suggesting that machines might one day become partners in understanding, not replacements for it. In this era, Ada became a guiding voice for ethical innovation. Her belief that machines should be built with purpose and imagination encouraged engineers to approach their work with responsibility and humility. Her caution against misinterpreting the power of symbolic machines echoed through the conversations about algorithmic bias, privacy, and the unintended consequences of technological growth. And her belief in collaboration between humans, between ideas, between different modes of thought, became a philosophical cornerstone for interdisciplinary research. The future she had glimpsed was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding all around. In modern society, Ada's story extended beyond academia and philosophy. Her influence reached families, communities, and individuals who entered the world of technology with curiosity and hope. Parents named their daughters Ada, believing the name carried the spirit of creativity and intelligence. Schools hosted hackathons inspired by her notes. Children attended poetical science workshops where they combined art and coding. Ada's vision of computation as a creative act, as a form of expression, had taken root in the culture itself. And yet, even as her legacy flourished in public spaces, something quieter happened in private ones. People who felt lost or ahead of their time found solace in her story. Innovators who faced doubt or isolation saw reflections of themselves in her struggles. Young programmers working late into the night felt connected to her as they wrote algorithms, the soft hum of computers echoing the rhythm of her early dreams. Her presence became a quiet companion, an invisible mentor, whispering that imagination belongs to everyone, not just those the world readily understands. As global challenges emerged, from climate modeling to disease prediction, from financial systems to scientific simulations, Ada's concept of symbolic manipulation took on new importance. Modern algorithms processed patterns in weather, health, and behavior, uncovering structures too complex for human minds alone. These advances often sparked awe, sometimes fear, but always reflection. Could Ada have imagined such complexity? Perhaps not in detail, but scholars agreed she would have understood the conceptual leap. After all, she had been the first to see that machines could operate on meaning, not just numbers. In the expanding universe of computation, Ada's legacy became a constellation, bright, stable, guiding. She belonged to no single field because she had helped to shape them all. She belonged to no single era because her ideas transcended every constraint of her time. She belonged to no single identity because she stood at the intersection of creativity and logic, a space that defied labels. And so the world embraced her not as a historical figure locked in the past, but as a timeless thinker, a companion to innovation, a muse for creativity, a symbol of possibility. In the quiet corners of the digital world where servers softly hummed, where code flowed across screens in nocturnal stillness, where algorithms shaped ideas and ideas shaped algorithms, Ada Lovelace lived on, not as memory, but as influence, not as legend, but as truth. Her future had become present. Her imagination had become architecture. Her questions had become foundations. Her vision had become reality. And the world, softly, steadily, beautifully, continued to grow into the one she foresaw. As the digital world matured into an intricate network of intelligence, creativity, and communication, Ada Lovelace's legacy shifted once again. It was no longer enough to say she had foretold computing. Those who studied her more deeply began to understand that she had also illuminated something far quieter, far more human, the emotional landscape beneath innovation. The more society embraced technology, the more it realized that machines alone could not define the future. It was the people behind them, their hopes, fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities, that shaped what technology became. And in that understanding, Ada's story gained new relevance. She was no longer just the first programmer or a visionary thinker. She became a reminder that every line of code, every machine, every algorithm begins with a human heart. She had lived in a time when her brilliance was questioned, when her imagination was misunderstood, when her vulnerabilities were seen as weaknesses, rather than the very forces that fueled her intuition. Yet her ideas endured because they carried the complexity of a human mind, one shaped by contradiction, struggle, and longing. As the 21st century drifted deeper into its digital phase, people began to ask profound questions about the role of technology in their lives. Machines could now write stories, compose music, and analyze human emotions. Artificial intelligence acted as companion, translator, assistant, and tool. But as people spent more time interacting with intelligent systems, many began to question what remained distinctly human. Where did imagination come from? What was intuition? Why did creativity feel so deeply tied to emotion? Ada's writings, with their blend of logic and poetry, provided surprising insight. She had argued that creativity was not simply an act of invention, but an expression of emotional and intellectual harmony. She believed machines could extend the reach of human creativity, but they could never replicate the deepest emotional currents that shaped human thought. Her belief in poetical science became a grounding philosophy in the debate about artificial intelligence, a reminder that innovation and empathy must coexist for technology to uplift rather than diminish humanity. Scholars revisited her letters, seeking clarity on how she saw the relationship between human emotion and computation. They found reflections of her own struggles, moments of fear, hope, longing, and resilience woven between lines of equations and diagrams. Ada did not view emotion as disorderly or dangerous. She saw it as the soil in which imagination grew. Her understanding became a vital reminder that the most powerful ideas often arise from the tension between discipline and feeling, structure and intuition. This perspective influenced not only scholars, but technologists who worked on designing human-centered systems. Engineers began building interfaces that prioritized empathy, accessibility, and connection. AI researchers studied how technology could support mental health, enhance creativity, and preserve cultural memory. In these efforts, Ada's vision remained a quiet guide. She had walked the boundary between imagination and logic with remarkable clarity, and modern innovators found echoes of her journey within their own work. Meanwhile, the general public grew increasingly interested in the human stories behind technological advancement. They wanted to know who had shaped their digital world, They wanted to understand the minds behind the screens. Ada's life, full of contradiction, courage, brilliance, and vulnerability, provided a meaningful narrative. Documentaries explored her relationship with her mother, her emotional struggles, her illnesses, and the limitations society placed upon her. People found comfort in these details, realizing that even those who shaped the future were human beings with doubts and fears. This emotional closeness to Ada became especially meaningful for young people who felt out of place in their own time. Students who struggled with traditional education found strength in Ada's story of unconventional learning. Creative thinkers drawn to both art and science saw themselves in her dual nature. Those living with chronic illness related to her pain and determination. Ada became a symbol of belonging for minds that did not fit neatly into categories, proof that brilliance thrives in the spaces others overlook. In this growing culture of reflection, Ada's legacy helped spark new conversations about the mental and emotional well-being of those working at the frontiers of innovation. People began asking whether the pressure to constantly create, build, and discover was sustainable. They wondered how vulnerability and creativity intersected. They discussed how isolation, ambition, and imagination often coexisted in the minds of thinkers like Ada. Her story encouraged the world to approach innovation with compassion, both toward technology and toward the people making it. As technology continued its rapid advancement, global society experienced profound changes. Virtual spaces complemented physical ones. Digital identities became as meaningful as offline ones. People connected across enormous distances through shared communities, interests, and stories. Yet amid all this connection, many also felt a sense of isolation, a quiet distance created by screens and constant information. And in these moments, Ada's legacy emerged once more as a source of grounding. She reminded the world that technology must support humanity, not replace it. She reminded innovators that systems reflect the intentions of those who build them. She reminded society that creativity is not a product of efficiency, but of depth. Her story became a gentle reminder that progress must always remain tethered to empathy. Meanwhile, in academic circles, researchers explored the emotional foundations of creative thinking. They studied how fear, curiosity, joy, and grief influenced innovation. They discovered that emotional complexity often fueled breakthroughs, that the mind worked best when both feeling and logic were allowed to coexist. Ada's life, filled with emotional intensity and intellectual brilliance, became a case study in this dynamic. Scholars recognized that her visionary thinking was not despite her emotional struggles, but intertwined with them. Even as Ada became a symbol of emotional intellectual harmony, her influence seeped quietly into political and ethical discussions. Leaders speaking about digital rights invoked her belief that machines were tools of amplification. They argued that technology should uplift human potential rather than diminish human dignity. And as debates grew about automation, job displacement, and the future of work, Ada's writings provided a lens through which people could reframe the conversation, not as a competition between humans and machines, but as a collaboration. In cultural spaces, Ada's presence grew ever more luminous. Her story appeared in movies, novels, and theater productions. Artists created sculptures inspired by her diagrams. Poets wrote verses imagining her dreams. Musicians set her equations to melody. And through these creative expressions, Ada became a symbol not just of the past, but of the timeless interplay between thought and expression. Children visiting museums walked past mechanical replicas of the analytical engine, watching gears turn in gentle rhythm. Some looked up at the machines with wide eyes, unaware that the person who had understood such a device best was a woman who lived long ago. Others pressed buttons, turning algorithms into whirling patterns of lights. And in those quiet moments of wonder, Ada's legacy flickered softly, finding new life within a new generation. Her presence was felt in subtle ways, too. A programmer debugging a stubborn function late at night felt the companionship of someone who once wrote the first algorithm in the quiet of candlelight. A mathematician exploring symbolic structures found echoes of her metaphors in looping logic. A young artist experimenting with generative design felt kinship with her belief in the artistry of computation. And people living at the edges of convention, balancing creativity and restraint, intuition and discipline, found affirmation in her journey. By the middle of the century, Ada Lovelace was no longer seen as a historical anomaly. She was recognized as a foundational thinker whose ideas shaped the philosophy of modern technology. She had become a permanent part of the global imagination, a symbol of what happens when logic is illuminated by creativity and imagination is refined by structure. Her life became a gentle reminder that visionaries often stand alone at first. But their ideas can echo through time in ways they never imagined. In the quiet hum of modern technology, Ada's presence felt almost spiritual, not as a ghost, but as a resonance, a reminder that the digital world was built not only from silicon and code, but from imagination, vulnerability, and human longing. Her belief that machines could expand human creativity became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as people continued to explore the boundaries of intelligence, expression, and meaning, Ada's early insights remained a compass. She had once predicted that machines might help us understand the invisible architectures of thought. Now, those architectures shaped global communication. She had imagined machines weaving symbolic patterns like looms weaving tapestries. Now, algorithms created artwork, music, and models of the world. She had believed that human imagination was boundless. Now it guided an era of unprecedented transformation. Ada Lovelace did not simply foresee the future of machines. She foresaw the future of humanity, a future shaped by curiosity, courage, and the quiet belief that imagination could illuminate the unknown. And as the world continued to evolve, her legacy remained a soft, guiding light, reminding every generation that the most powerful inventions begin not with knowledge, but with wonder. As the digital century deepened, Ada Lovelace's legacy settled into a place few historical figures ever reach, a quiet permanence woven through the structure of modern life. Her influence no longer felt like a rediscovery or a resurgence. It felt like something foundational, something so deeply embedded in the architecture of thought and technology that the world could not move forward without echoing her footsteps. Each new invention, each breakthrough in artificial intelligence, each artistic fusion of code and creativity carried her imprint in subtle, luminous ways. The more society advanced, the more Ada's conceptual clarity seemed prophetic. She had written of machines manipulating symbols, and now symbolic logic underpinned every layer of digital communication. She had imagined engines capable of generating music, patterns, and ideas, and now generative models produced symphonies, artworks, and narratives at a scale her world could never have imagined. Even her belief in the emotional dimension of creativity seemed to anticipate the age when artists and machines collaborated rather than competed. The world had caught up to her imagination, and in some quiet way, it was still trying to. Yet, despite this extraordinary alignment between her vision and reality, Ada's story remained deeply human. People continued exploring the personal part of her legacy. The fragile child taught mathematics to quell her inherited imagination. The young woman balancing emotion with discipline, the brilliant mind constrained by her era. The visionary glimpses she captured in moments of clarity. Her life became a mirror, reflecting how imagination often grows in the spaces between permission and defiance, between structure and intuition, between longing and insight. As technology reached deeper into everyday life, Ada's legacy found unexpected resonance in intimate moments. A musician using code to shape harmonies felt her presence in the beauty of the patterns. A scientist running simulations of weather, physics, or biology recognized in these complex systems the same layers of symbolic transformation Ada once described. A child learning to code through playful experiments unknowingly took part in the same lineage she had begun. These quiet experiences, scattered, personal, unremarked upon, formed the most poignant expression of her legacy. This gentle proliferation of influence revealed a truth Ada had understood long before her world was ready. Ideas, once released, have lives of their own. They drift, grow, evolve, and eventually find the minds that can nurture them. Her ideas lived in notebooks for a century, waiting for the world to rise to their height. And when it finally did, they blossomed into something vast. Not merely a field of study, but a philosophy, a perspective, an invitation to see logic and imagination as partners in exploration. The deeper humanity moved into its digital era, the more Ada's concept of poetical science took root. At its heart was a simple but transformative truth. The best ideas come from blending reason with wonder. Engineers embraced this philosophy as they built technologies designed not merely to function, but to empower. Artists adopted it as they used algorithms to craft new kinds of beauty. Educators wove it into their lessons, reminding students that creativity is not the opposite of structure. It is the breath that gives structure life. Meanwhile, scholars continued unraveling Ada's personal journey, uncovering layers of complexity that shaped her mind. Her occasional self-doubt revealed the humility behind her brilliance. Her ambition showed the hunger to understand the world more deeply than her era allowed. Her isolation illuminated the depth of her imagination, an imagination that flourished not in spite of difficulty, but partly because of it. People found themselves reflecting on her experiences not as distant historical facts, but as emotional truths they had felt in their own lives. In this growing global admiration, Ada's name became synonymous with resilience, creativity, and visionary thought. Companies, research labs, art collectives, and educational programs adopted her name as a symbol of innovation free from boundaries. Cities installed sculptures in her honor. Streets, libraries, and schools were renamed for her. And each year, Ada Lovelace Day grew into a worldwide celebration, not only of her contributions, but of the countless minds she had inspired across generations. Yet even with all this recognition, Ada's story maintained its quietness. It did not need grandiosity. It thrived in the gentle way her ideas flowed through the world, quiet as the movement of data across a fiber network, soft as the hum of a server room late at night, steady as the glow of a monitor illuminating a student's first line of code. Her legacy resided not in spectacle, but in presence. It lived in the small, intimate moments where imagination sparked and curiosity deepened. As artificial intelligence explored deeper levels of cognition and creativity, Ada's insights grew even more meaningful. Engineers designing intelligent systems returned to her writings for philosophical grounding. They debated whether machines could ever truly understand symbols or whether they simply manipulated patterns. Ada's belief that machines were extensions of the human mind, amplifiers rather than imitators, offered a gentle perspective amid debates often filled with anxiety and speculation. Her writings reminded people that no machine, no matter how advanced, encapsulates the full depth of human nuance, and that technology's greatest purpose is not to replace human creativity, but to extend the reach of human possibility. In the contemplative silence of libraries, in the energetic hum of research labs, in the soft glow of classrooms and studios where imagination and logic intertwined, Ada Lovelace's presence felt almost serene, a guiding spirit reminding the world that the future belonged not to those who feared complexity, but to those who embraced wonder. The deeper society moved into the digital unknown, the more Ada's voice seemed to whisper across time. Everything begins with imagination. And so the world continued forward, guided by that principle, building systems that could learn, adapt, and assist, imagining possibilities that blended the emotional with the analytical, and reaching toward horizons Ada herself had only glimpsed. Her influence became inseparable from the evolution of technology, and her spirit became an anchor in conversations that shaped the unfolding digital century. Her story, once forgotten, now became a reminder that visionary ideas do not need immediate recognition to endure. They need only a mind willing to imagine a world different from the one it inhabits. Ada had been such a mind, and in the gentle glow of screens and the quiet hum of circuits, her imagination still flickered, steady, patient, timeless. And so, as our journey with Ada Lovelace draws to a close, let us return to the quiet room where her story began. A room lit by candlelight filled with papers, diagrams, and the soft scratch of her pen. A room where a young woman once dreamed of machines that could think, weave, and create. She could not have known how far her vision would travel, how many lives it would touch, or how deeply her imagination would shape the world. Tonight, her story becomes a gentle reminder that the future is written by those willing to imagine it, by those who dare to see beyond their time, by those who find beauty in patterns and courage in curiosity. As you drift into rest, let her story settle softly in your thoughts. Let her imagination guide you, let her courage inspire you, and let her timeless belief in wonder remind you that every idea, even the quietest one, can change the world. This has been the life of Ada Lovelace, the first programmer, the dreamer of machines, the woman who saw the future. Good night. And may your own imagination wander far beyond the limits of today.